Man, where you coming from? Where you headed?
I'll address travel questions after we handle the stop. What's the traffic reason you pulled me over?
All right, man, I need your license and registration.
I'm happy to handle the traffic stop. They're inside my car. I'll show you.
Go ahead, get the documents.
What happens if you do everything right in a traffic stop? Signal, pull over, hands visible, license ready, and the officer still decides your compliance isn't enough? And what if the next thing he demands isn't about the stop at all? That exact question got answered the night a black civil rights lawyer got pulled over for a minor issue, then watched an officer turn a routine interaction into an unlawful detention on camera. Where are you watching from right now, city or state? Drop it in the comments. And if you like stories where calm wins, receipts matter, and authority gets checked the right way, hit like and subscribe. Now rewind. Malik Grant wasn't reckless. He wasn't speeding through neighborhoods. He wasn't weaving. He was heading home after a long day, suit jacket tossed on the passenger seat, phone on the dash mount like always. A patrol car lit him up near a gas station in a strip mall, bright area, cameras everywhere. Malik noticed that immediately. He pulled over clean, turned the engine off, rolled the window halfway down, hands on the wheel. Officer Tyler Briggs approached like he'd already decided what kind of person Malik was. Briggs asked for license and registration. Malik handed them over. Normal. Then the stop started drifting. Briggs didn't stick to the supposed reason. He began asking questions that weren't about a traffic issue. Where Malik was coming from. Where he was going. Who the car belonged to. Little probes, not illegal by themselves, just a setup. Malik answered the minimum and then got quiet, not rude, controlled. That's when Briggs pushed for more. He demanded Malik provide additional identification, not his driver's license. Something else. Extra proof. Malik didn't flinch. He didn't puff his chest out either. He spoke like a man who knew the exact line between cooperation and surrender. He told Briggs he'd already provided what the law required for a traffic stop. He said he wasn't obligated to produce a second form of ID without a legal basis. He asked if he was suspected of a crime beyond the traffic infraction. He asked if he was being detained for something specific. Briggs didn't answer those questions cleanly. He didn't clarify. He didn't wrap the stop up. He treated Malik's legal clarity as a challenge. Briggs repeated the demand, louder, sharper. He implied Malik was refusing. He implied consequences. Malik stayed steady and did the one thing that changes the whole power dynamic. He made a record. He stated that he was recording. He stated he would comply with lawful orders. He stated he did not consent to any search. He asked for a supervisor. He asked, again, whether he was free to go. Briggs didn't like the recording part. You could tell by how quickly the tone changed. Briggs ordered Malik out of the car. Here's what matters. Officers can order a driver out during a stop in many situations. That's real. The trick is how it gets used. Safety tool or punishment tool. This felt like punishment. Malik didn't argue on the roadside. He moved slowly, hands visible. He narrated his actions as he stepped out. He said he was doing it under protest, not consent. He said he wanted a supervisor present. Briggs directed Malik to the back of the car. Tight posture, close distance, commands stacked on commands. Then Briggs went right back to the demand. Extra ID, extra compliance, extra submission. Malik asked the question that kills games like this later. What legal basis existed to extend the stop beyond the traffic issue? Briggs didn't give one. He pivoted to attitude, respect, cooperation, that old script. And then Briggs slipped. Not with a slur, not with something that would make the department panic instantly. He made it personal. He focused on Malik's tone and confidence, like that was the threat. Like a calm black man who knows the rules is automatically suspicious. That's when Malik revealed he was an attorney. Not to flex, to put the officer on notice that the words being said right now were going to matter later. Briggs didn't back off. He backed into a new plan. He walked to his cruiser not to finish the citation, but to buy time and search for justification after the fact. Malik stayed where he was told, recording, speaking clearly. He noted the time, the location, badge number. He pointed out the businesses nearby with cameras. He sent a quick message to his sister with his location and what was happening. Not drama, documentation. Cars passed. A couple slowed. People stared and kept moving. Nobody wanted to get involved. Also normal. Then Briggs came back from the cruiser with a different energy. Like he'd decided the stop couldn't end until Malik learned something. Briggs came back from his cruiser holding Malik's driver's license and didn't hand it back. That move changed the whole stop. A normal traffic stop ends when the license is checked, a citation is issued, or a warning is given, and the driver leaves. Briggs didn't do that. He used the license like a handle to keep Malik in place. He told Malik he needed additional verification and demanded a second form of ID. Not because Malik refused to identify himself. Malik already did. Not because the license looked fake. Briggs never said that. Briggs just wanted more. Malik didn't raise his voice. He didn't try to embarrass the officer. He asked the only questions that matter when a stop drifts. What crime was being investigated beyond the traffic issue? And what legal basis existed to demand extra identification after the driver's license had been provided? Briggs didn't answer cleanly. He moved to attitude. He framed Malik's questions as disrespect. He treated basic boundaries like defiance. Then Briggs escalated the pressure the way officers do when they don't have a real reason but still want control. He repeated the demand for another ID. He warned Malik the stop would get worse if he kept making it hard. He implied Malik could be detained longer. He floated obstruction like it was a button he could press any time. Malik didn't debate the definition of obstruction on the roadside. He just pinned Briggs to the record. He asked Briggs to state what law Malik was violating by refusing a second ID when he'd already provided his driver's license. Briggs couldn't do it. He didn't cite anything specific. He went back to suspicious behavior in officer safety, broad words, convenient words, the kind you can't easily disprove in the moment, but also the kind that collapse when there's video and timestamps. Malik kept building the timeline out loud for his recording. He stated he had already produced license, registration, and insurance. He stated he would accept a citation or warning for the traffic issue. He stated he did not consent to searches. He stated he was requesting a supervisor because Briggs was extending the stop without stating a lawful reason. Briggs tried to change the geometry. He directed Malik to stand farther away, closer to a spot where the phone would capture less. He attempted to control the angle by controlling Malik's position. Malik didn't argue about it. He made a practical adjustment to keep his phone pointed where it needed to be. Subtle, not dramatic. Still effective. That's when Briggs went after the recording. He told Malik to stop recording and implied it wasn't allowed. He implied it could be taken as interference. Malik didn't touch the phone. He kept his hands visible. He stated that the phone was mounted, he wasn't holding it, and he wasn't interfering with the officer's movement. Then he asked Briggs to confirm whether he was issuing a lawful order to stop recording. Briggs didn't confirm it because he couldn't. He just repeated himself. You could see the problem forming in real time. Briggs wanted Malik to either comply and surrender the record or refuse in a way Briggs could label as non-compliance. Malik wasn't giving him either. Then Malik did something that shifted Briggs's mindset. He identified himself as a civil rights attorney. Not a speech, not a threat. Just a fact stated plainly, like it belonged in the timeline. Briggs paused for a second. Not long, just long enough to show he understood what that meant. This wasn't a random driver who'd forget the details tomorrow. This was someone trained to preserve details and force them into documents. Briggs could have ended the stop right there. Hand back the license, issue the warning, walk away, clean exit. He didn't. He doubled down, demanded the extra ID again, and reintroduced obstruction, like saying the word might make it true. Malik stayed in the same lane. He repeated that he'd comply with lawful orders tied to the traffic stop. He repeated that he would not provide additional identification without reasonable suspicion of another crime. He requested a supervisor again. Briggs finally called for one. While they waited, Briggs kept the stop suspended in that uncomfortable middle state, not arresting Malik, not releasing him, keeping him standing, keeping his license, letting time do the work. That's a tactic too. Malik didn't fill the silence with nervous explanations. He didn't try to convince Briggs he was a good person. He stayed focused on the legal structure of the stop. He continued recording. He spoke in short, factual statements for the timeline: location, time, and what was being demanded. Then Sergeant Elena Park arrived. Park stepped out and read the scene fast. Malik standing near the rear of his car, phone recording, hands visible. Briggs in control of Malik's documents. No visible danger, no frantic movement, no obvious reason for the stop to still be going. Park asked Briggs what the stop was for. Briggs named a minor infraction, something that usually leads to a quick warning. Park asked whether Malik had provided his driver's license. Briggs admitted he had. Park asked what new crime justified demanding a second form of ID and holding Malik longer. Briggs tried to fill the gap with vague claims. He described Malik as uncooperative. He implied Malik's answers didn't satisfy him. He suggested Malik's demeanor raised suspicion. Park didn't accept demeanor as a crime. You could tell by how she narrowed it down. She asked if the license was valid. Briggs said it came back valid. That should have ended it. Park told Briggs to return Malik's documents. Briggs hesitated. Park repeated it, firmer. That wasn't negotiation. That was oversight. Briggs handed the documents back. Park told Malik he was free to leave. Malik didn't ask for an apology. He didn't argue about what just happened. He asked for the incident number and how to request body camera footage. He confirmed Park's name and role on scene so it couldn't get fuzzy later. He repeated Briggs's badge number out loud for the recording, then got into his car and drove off. Briggs stayed behind, watching Malik leave, the way someone watches a situation they thought they controlled slip out of their hands. And Malik already knew what came next. Not a debate, not a viral clip first, a complaint, evidence requests, internal review, then the part departments hate most, a lawsuit built on their own video. Malik got home and didn't sleep it off. He locked the evidence down. He saved the recording to cloud storage and to a second device. Then he wrote a timeline while every detail was still fresh. Exact location, approximate minute marks, the order of demands, the moment Briggs threatened obstruction, the moment Briggs tried to shut down the recording, the moment Sergeant Park arrived and ended it. By morning, Malik filed a formal complaint. He didn't write it like an emotional story. He wrote it like something that could survive a review board. He described what happened in plain language. Briggs demanded additional ID after Malik already provided a driver's license. Briggs couldn't state reasonable suspicion for another crime. Briggs kept Malik detained anyway. Briggs threatened arrest for obstruction when Malik asked for the legal basis. Briggs tried to order Malik to stop recording. The stop ended only after a supervisor arrived. Then Malik made sure the department couldn't pretend there was no evidence. He requested body camera footage for Briggs and Park. He requested dash camera footage. He requested the CAD logs and radio traffic. He requested the dispatch notes and any database check timestamps tied to his license and plate. He also sent a preservation letter. That letter matters because once it's on record, missing footage becomes a bigger problem. Internal Affairs opened a case within a few days. Lieutenant Harris handled it. Straight policy mindset. No speeches, just facts. First thing Harris did was pull Briggs' written narrative. Briggs described Malik as uncooperative and suggested Malik refuse to identify. That phrasing shows up a lot because it makes the officer sound justified without explaining what actually happened. Harris compared that narrative to the records. The CAD log showed when the stop started and when the license check happened. It showed the stop stayed active long after the traffic purpose should have been finished. That gap needed an explanation. Then, the footage came in. The video showed Malik handing over his license early and staying controlled. It showed Briggs demanding a second ID without naming a crime. It showed the obstruction threat. It showed Briggs pushing to end the recording. It showed Park arriving and immediately asking basic questions that Briggs couldn't answer. It showed Park ordering the documents returned and releasing Malik. That's when Briggs' story started falling apart. Harris interviewed Briggs and didn't let him hide behind buzzwords. Briggs tried officer safety and suspicious demeanor. Harris asked for the specific facts that created reasonable suspicion. Harris asked why extra ID was required if the license was valid. Harris asked why obstruction was mentioned when Malik wasn't physically interfering or refusing lawful traffic stop requirements. Briggs couldn't point to a real trigger. He kept circling back to Malik's tone and attitude. That's not a legal basis, that's ego. Harris also interviewed Park. Park didn't defend Briggs. She confirmed what mattered. Malik had provided his license, Briggs didn't articulate a separate crime on scene, and Park ended the detention immediately. Park's statement didn't need to call Briggs biased. It just needed to show he had no lawful reason to keep pushing. After that, the department did what it always claims it does. They checked pattern. They pulled other stops from Briggs's recent months. Not because Malik demanded it. Because once there's a documented complaint with video and a supervisor intervention, command staff starts thinking about liability. If this wasn't the first time Briggs stretched stops and leaned on intimidation, the department needed to know before it showed up in court. Briggs got moved off solo patrol during the review. That's not a public punishment, but inside the station, it's loud. It changes your assignments. It changes your reputation. It tells everyone the brass is watching your work. A few weeks later, the discipline decision hit. Briggs received a suspension and mandatory retraining focused on detention limits and constitutional policing during traffic stops. He also lost certain privileges tied to independent patrol work for a period. That's how departments try to contain a problem without admitting the bigger one. He shouldn't have done it in the first place. Malik read the finding and didn't treat it like the finish line. Internal discipline happens quietly. It doesn't repair the harm. It doesn't deter the next officer who thinks intimidation is policing. Malik wanted accountability that had teeth. So he moved to the next step. Malik filed the lawsuit 2 weeks after the discipline letter landed. He didn't file it to get back at Briggs. He filed it because internal punishment doesn't protect the next person. A civil rights case forces facts into the open. Depositions, policies, training records, stop data. That's where departments start taking it seriously. The complaint named 2 defendants, Officer Tyler Briggs and the city police department. The claims were straightforward and dangerous for the city. Briggs unlawfully extended a traffic stop after the traffic purpose was complete. Briggs demanded additional identification without reasonable suspicion of a separate crime. Briggs threatened obstruction as a pressure tool, not as a lawful charge. Briggs attempted to stop Malik from recording, which looked like an effort to control evidence. Malik's legal theory wasn't fancy. It was clean. The Constitution doesn't allow an officer to keep someone detained just because the person doesn't sound cooperative. The stop has a purpose. Once that purpose is done, the officer needs a real, articulable reason to keep going. The city's first response was predictable. They tried to downgrade it. They argued Malik wasn't really harmed because he wasn't arrested. They claimed Briggs acted in good faith. They said it was a miscommunication during a lawful stop. That argument didn't survive the evidence. Malik's team attached the timeline, the supervisor's involvement, and the internal findings. They leaned hard on the part that kills the city's defense. Park arrived, asked what new crime existed, got no clear answer, and ended the detention immediately. Then discovery started. This is where the department stopped treating it like one officer's mistake and started treating it like a risk. Malik requested Briggs's body cam and dash cam in full, not clipped. Park's body cam in full. CAD logs, radio audio, dispatch notes. Training records for Briggs, including constitutional policing and traffic stop procedures. Briggs's prior complaints and discipline history to the extent allowed. Stop data to see whether Briggs disproportionately extended stops or demanded extra ID from certain drivers. Department policies on identification demands, stop duration, and recording by civilians. The city fought some of it. Of course they did. They tried to limit the scope. They argued privacy. They argued relevance. They tried to keep it narrow enough that it stayed just this one night. Malik pushed back with something cities hate: pattern evidence. Because once you show this wasn't random, the settlement number changes. And the political heat changes too. Depositions were the turning point. Briggs got questioned under oath. The questions were basic, but every answer mattered. Why did he demand a second ID after the driver's license was provided? What crime did he suspect? When did he develop that suspicion? Why did he threaten obstruction? Briggs tried to wrap everything in safety. Malik's side pulled him back to specifics. Safety from what? What threat, what behavior, what facts? Briggs couldn't point to anything concrete that justified extending the stop. He kept circling back to refusal and uncooperative attitude. That's how you lose a civil rights case. You admit the detention was driven by emotion, not law. Then Park testified. Park didn't attack Briggs. She didn't need to. She confirmed she asked for the basis of continued detention and didn't get one. She confirmed she ordered the documents returned and released Malik. Now the city had a problem. Not a PR problem. A courtroom problem. Because a jury doesn't need to love Malik to understand this. You don't get to detain someone longer because you didn't like how they spoke. The city moved towards settlement. They didn't call it an admission. They never do. They framed it as resolving the matter. But the terms told the truth. Malik received a significant financial settlement. Part of it covered legal fees. Part of it compensated him for the unlawful detention and the rights violation. The amount wasn't a lottery number, but it wasn't a nuisance check either. It was enough that the city council asked questions. The city also agreed to non-monetary terms, updated training focused on stop duration limits and ID demands, a policy reminder about civilians recording police in public spaces, supervisor review triggers for extended stops without clear reasonable suspicion. Those changes weren't perfect, but they were real. They created friction against the exact behavior Briggs used that night. Briggs faced consequences beyond the earlier suspension. His discipline stayed in his file. His deposition testimony followed him. Promotions became harder. Specialty assignments got out of reach. Supervisors watched his stops. And inside policing culture, being the officer tied to a settlement and policy change isn't a quiet thing. It sticks. Malik didn't turn into a superhero after this. He stayed the same person. He just became even more methodical about teaching people what actually works in moments like this. Not yelling. Not trying to win the roadside argument. Staying calm. Saying as little as possible. Asking the right questions, recording, getting the supervisor. Then using the system after the fact. When you can do it safely. That's the lesson. A lot of people think accountability only happens if you get lucky. Malik showed something else. Accountability happens when you keep your head, preserve evidence, and force the story into places where it can't be edited. So let me ask you, if you were Malik, would you have stayed that calm? Or would the pressure have pulled you into the argument Briggs wanted? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you've ever had a stop that felt like it turned into a power game, share what happened. And don't forget to like, subscribe, And stick around for more real stories where people stand their ground and the receipts do the talking.
Stop a second. Let me see your documents that prove you are a U.S. citizen.
Why I should do this? Is there a clear reason?
I don't need a reason. Just show me the documents.
What's the legal reason for the stop?
I need proof of citizenship or lawful status. Show me and we're done.
I'm willing to cooperate. Identify yourself clearly and tell me the basis.
What happens when a plainclothes immigration agent blocks a black doctor outside a hospital before sunrise, demands proof he belongs there, and won't even say whether it's a detention? It doesn't stay a rude stop for long. Because the cameras don't just catch the attitude, they catch the tactics. And once witnesses step in, the whole thing turns into a documented mess the agent can't talk his way out of. Quick question before we rewind. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or state in the comments. And if you like stories where people don't win by yelling, but by staying sharp and forcing accountability, hit like and subscribe. You'll want more of these. Now, here's what everyone nearby saw. Dr. Malcolm Evans walked from the employee lot toward the main entrance. Badge visible, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. He looked like every early shift doctor who didn't sleep enough and had too much to do. An unknown man stepped into his path like he owned the sidewalk. Not in a friendly way, not with a question. With that clipped tone people use when they're trying to turn a public space into a private interrogation. The man demanded identification and leaned on federal authority without explaining anything. Evans didn't flinch. He didn't puff his chest. He didn't try to prove he was important. He kept it procedural. He asked if he was being detained or if he was free to go. He asked for the legal reason. He asked the man to identify himself clearly. The man didn't answer those questions. He just repeated the demand for ID and moved closer. That was the whole play. Crowd the space, control the pace, make compliance feel like the only safe option. Evans didn't give him the reaction he wanted. No anger, no panic, no fast movements. He stayed in place and repeated the same boundaries. Identify yourself. State the reason. Clarify detention status. The man switched tactics. He implied that refusing meant guilt. He hinted at searching Evans. He raised his voice just enough to pull attention from the entrance doors. A couple staff members looked over, then slowed down. That's what the agent wanted. Public pressure. Embarrassment as a weapon. Evans didn't bite. He repositioned slightly, not dramatically. Just enough that he wasn't boxed in. He didn't sprint. He didn't back up like he was scared either. He scanned the area like someone who understood environments. Exterior cameras, a security patrol route, staff traffic. A lit entrance with people going in and out. He used what was there. Evans told the man to call his supervisor if this was legitimate. Then he asked for hospital security to come out. Not as a threat, as a step. A normal step in a workplace with policies. That request changed the temperature. You could see it in the man's posture. Because one-on-one intimidation works best when nobody else is watching and nobody else is writing anything down. Now there were witnesses. Now there would be names, times, footage. Now it wasn't just Evans versus a guy with a badge and an attitude. A nurse coming in for shift slowed near the doors. A resident stood half-turned like he wasn't trying to stare, but couldn't ignore it. A custodian paused by the sidewalk edge, watching the space the way people do when they're ready to step in if it goes sideways. The man tried to keep it vague. He kept repeating that he was federal and that Evans needed to comply. Still no clear reason. Still no direct answer on detention. Evans stayed steady and kept making the man choose. Either this was a detention with a reason, or it was not. Either the man could identify himself properly, or he couldn't. Either there was lawful cause, or this was harassment dressed up as authority. Security arrived within minutes. And that was the point where the agent stopped acting like the scene belonged to him. Because security didn't care about swagger. They cared about procedure. Who are you? What agency? Why are you stopping an employee on hospital property? Are you detaining him, yes or no? The agent tried to talk around it. Security didn't let him, and right there, on camera in front of staff, the agent's story started to wobble. Security showed up with that work mode calm. No drama, just questions. The kind that force people to either explain themselves or expose themselves. They asked the agent who he was, what agency, and why he was stopping an employee on hospital property. They asked if Dr. Evans was being detained. The agent tried to keep control by staying vague. He leaned hard on federal authority and investigation language. He didn't want to say the words that create liability, detention, reasonable suspicion, probable cause. Anything specific. Security didn't let him float. They asked for credentials. They asked for a name. They asked for a badge number. They asked if he'd checked in with administration like any outside enforcement is supposed to do. That's when the agent tried a different move. He attempted to make Evans the problem. He suggested Evans was being uncooperative. He implied that refusal alone made him suspicious. Evans stayed locked in. He didn't argue character. He didn't argue status. He kept the same line. He'd cooperate once the agent identified himself clearly and stated the legal basis for the stop. He repeated that he didn't consent to any search. He repeated the question about detention. Security started treating it like what it was. An unknown plainclothesman trying to hold a staff doctor in place without a clear reason. They positioned themselves so Evans wasn't boxed in. Subtle, but deliberate. They also made sure they were between the agent and the entrance traffic. Now the agent had a new problem. He couldn't intimidate Evans, and he couldn't intimidate security either. So he reached for the oldest tool in the kit: volume. He spoke louder so staff would hear. He threw out phrases that sound official but don't mean much. He tried to create the impression that Evans was doing something wrong by not instantly complying. It didn't land. Not the way he wanted. Because the staff watching weren't confused about what they were seeing. They saw a doctor trying to go to work. They saw a man trying to stop him without explaining why. They saw security asking normal questions and getting dodges in return. Security asked if the agent had an active case tied to the hospital. They asked if he had a description and why Evans matched it. They asked if there was a warrant. They asked if there was a bolo with a specific person in it. The agent gave the kind of answer that sounds confident until someone repeats it back slowly. Something about a possible match. Something about a lookout. Something about needing to verify. Security pressed for details. Height, clothing, name, photo, anything. That's where the story started shifting. First it was a match, then it became similar, then it turned into routine verification, then it slid into just doing my job. You could see the scramble. He didn't want to admit he had nothing. He also didn't want to leave, because leaving looks like he was wrong. Evans didn't help him save face. He didn't attack him either. He just let the questions do the work. Security asked for the agent's supervisor. Evans asked again too. Not emotional, just persistent. And security backed it. They told the agent to call his supervisor or they would. The agent finally made the call. While they waited, security documented time, location, description, names of witnesses who were willing to give them. They noted the badge and credentials once the agent reluctantly showed them. They also made it clear the hospital had exterior cameras covering the walkway. That camera mention hit different, because now it wasn't a he said. It was footage. Audio from multiple angles, timestamp. The agent tried one last pressure move. He told Evans that if he walked away, it would look bad. He hinted there could be consequences. Evans didn't respond with fear. He responded like a professional who understands leverage. He told security he had rounds. He stated he was willing to wait for the supervisor's arrival, but he wasn't going to be held without a lawful reason. That's the moment security got sharper. They told the agent, plainly, that he needed to clarify whether Evans was being detained. Because if he wasn't, Evans was going to work. The agent hesitated. And hesitation told everyone what the agent wouldn't say out loud. Because if he said yes, he'd need justification. If he said no, he'd lose control. That's when the supervisor arrived. And the second that supervisor stepped into the scene, the whole vibe changed again. The supervisor didn't posture. He went straight to verification. Quick questions, quick checks, the stuff that takes 1 minute when it's actually legitimate. And the truth started to surface fast. Evans wasn't the person the agent claimed to be looking for. Not even close. The supervisor walked in and didn't waste time trying to win the moment. He went straight for the basics. Who the employee was, what the agent thought he had, what the actual target description was supposed to be, what the legal basis was for a stop on hospital property. And you could almost feel the agent's story shrinking as the questions got simpler. The supervisor asked Evans for his hospital ID. Evans showed it. Security watched the exchange closely, making sure nobody turned it into a grab or a snatch and search moment. The supervisor checked the badge, looked at the name, looked at the photo, then looked back at his own agent, like he already knew what this was, because the mismatch was obvious. The agent tried to patch it anyway. He mentioned a similar description and acted like it was normal to stop someone based on a vague idea of who they might be. He tried to slide the narrative into no harm done, routine check, everyone move on. Security didn't let that rewrite happen. They asked what the original description actually was. They asked whether the agent had a photo. They asked whether he had a case number. They asked whether he had requested hospital cooperation through the proper channels. The supervisor didn't answer with a story. He answered with damage control. He told the agent to disengage. He told him Evans wasn't the person. He told him to clear out. The agent didn't apologize. He didn't admit anything. He tried to leave like it was a normal stop that reached a normal conclusion. But the scene was already locked into record. Security had the time log. They had the agent's identity. They had his supervisor's name. They had witnesses who watched the whole interaction start to finish. They also had exterior cameras that covered the walkway and the entrance. And now, because the supervisor had stepped in and confirmed Evans wasn't the target, the agent had no room left to claim ongoing suspicion. The reason for holding Evans in place was gone. Evans kept it calm to the end. He didn't take a victory lap. He didn't lecture the agent. He said one thing that landed because it was clean and factual. He wasn't going to be treated like a suspect without a reason, and he wasn't going to consent his way into someone else's mistake. Then he went to work. That's the part people always miss when they watch these situations from the outside. The moment ends, but your body doesn't. Evans walked into the hospital with his coffee and his phone like he'd planned. But he wasn't fine. He was controlled. There's a difference. He still had patients, he still had rounds. He still had to lead a team and make decisions like nothing happened. That takes effort. Later that day, security pulled the incident report together. They preserved camera footage. They wrote down witness names. They flagged that a federal agent had approached and attempted to stop an employee without checking in, without a stated lawful basis, and without clear detention language. The next layer hit fast. Hospital administration got notified. Risk management got looped in. HR got looped in. Not because Evans was special, because it happened on their property, involved their employee, and created liability. And now the agency couldn't pretend it never happened. Because when you have a timestamped security log, camera footage, and there's witness statements, and a supervisor who verified the mistake on scene, that's not rumor. That's evidence. The agent tried to escape the situation with one last move as he left. He spoke like he expected everyone to drop it, like the badge itself was supposed to end the conversation. Security didn't argue with him. They didn't need to. They just told him the hospital would be following up through official channels. By the next morning, the story had already moved through the hospital in the way these things always do, not as gossip, as a warning. People didn't talk about it like some weird thing. They talked about it like a line got crossed and everyone saw it. Nurses, residents, security, even staff who weren't there. Because somebody always knows somebody who was standing 10 feet away. Evans showed up for his shift again. Same routine, same badge, same parking lot. Different feeling. He kept doing his job, but he didn't let it slide. Not privately, not quietly. Not with a, whatever, it's over. That day, he met with hospital security and asked for the incident report number. He asked who had access to the camera footage. He asked for the names of the supervisor and agent as recorded. He asked what the hospital's official process was when an outside enforcement officer approached staff on campus. He treated it like a patient case. Document, confirm, escalate properly. Security already had the key pieces. Time-stamped logs of when the agent approached, names and descriptions. Witnesses who agreed to be listed. Confirmation that the supervisor arrived and ended it. Camera angles covering the walkway and entrance. Then hospital administration stepped in. Risk management got involved first because this wasn't just someone felt uncomfortable. This was an outside agent interfering with a staff member in the course of reporting for duty, on hospital property, in front of witnesses, with cameras. That's liability, safety, and operations all at once. HR got involved too, not to handle feelings, but to support the employee and document what happened as a workplace incident. They asked Evans for a written statement. He gave them one. Tight, factual, chronological, no extra, no rant. He also filed an external complaint, not a social media blast, not a viral post, the formal kind. He submitted the incident details, names, time, location, and the fact that the agent refused to state whether it was a detention while trying to restrict movement. He emphasized that the entire encounter existed on camera and involved multiple employees as witnesses. That detail mattered. Because he said, she said is easy to bury. Video and logs aren't. The hospital did its own follow-up. They contacted the agency through official channels and made something clear. Any future presence on campus required check-in through hospital administration and security. No more free roaming, no more lone plainclothes stops of staff walking in from the employee lot. If there was a legitimate need, it went through the proper route. And here's what changed fast, because hospitals don't like chaos. Security updated protocol. Staff got a short guidance memo. It didn't turn into a political speech. It was practical. If someone claims federal authority on campus, employees were told to direct them to security and keep moving if they weren't detained. If an employee felt blocked or pressured, call security immediately. No one was expected to handle it alone. Security also shifted patrol presence during early hours for a while. Not because the hospital feared immigration agents, because they wanted staff to feel protected walking in at 5 a.m. As for the agent, this is where reality comes in. You don't always see instant public punishment. You usually see quiet consequences. The agent's name was now attached to a recorded incident. His supervisor's presence on the footage mattered too. The hospital's complaint created a paper trail outside the building. That changes how people act in the future. It forces oversight. It forces internal review. It also makes it harder for that same agent to pull the same move on the same property again without someone recognizing him. Evans didn't get a parade. He didn't need one. He got something better. A documented record that protected him and everyone who came after him. A protocol. A line in the sand that said, you don't get to treat staff like suspects just because you feel like it. And that's the part people should take from this. Evans didn't win because he was a doctor. He won because he didn't play the agent's game. He didn't argue emotions. He didn't try to impress anyone. He forced procedure. He asked the questions that matter. Am I being detained or free to go? What's the legal reason? Who are you exactly? Call a supervisor. Bring security. Put it on record. That's how you survive an overreach moment without turning it into a bigger problem for yourself. So here's the question for you. If you were Evans, would you have stayed calm and gone procedural? Or would the pressure have pulled you into a reaction the other guy could use? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you've ever had someone use authority like a weapon, share this with somebody who needs a smarter playbook. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Real situations, real accountability, and people who refuse to get bullied out of their dignity.
Stop. Don't go anywhere. What'd you take?
Sir, why you asking me? I didn't steal anything.
Then show me. Empty your pockets.
I don't want to empty my pockets. Sir, I told you I have nothing.
We can do this easy or we can do it the hard way. Pockets. Now.
I'm not trying to start anything, but I didn't take it then.
What happens when a mall security officer decided a black teen looked like a shoplifter, blocked his path with zero report, and started treating guilt like it was already proven? The answer got ugly fast because the cameras didn't just catch a bad stop. They caught an officer building a case after the accusation. Quick check-in. Where are you watching from right now? City and state? And if you watch stories about accountability, body cams, and people getting exposed by their own choices, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. So here's what was happening in that moment. The teenager had just walked out of a store with a shopping bag, drink in hand, receipt inside the bag like most people do without thinking. He wasn't running. He wasn't hiding anything. He was doing what teens do at malls every day. The officer came in fast anyway. No slow approach, no polite ask. He closed distance, stepped into the teen's lane, and turned it into a corner. Then he went straight to an accusation. Not a question. Not a check. He acted like the theft already happened, and the only thing left was getting the kid to admit it or comply with a search. That's the move. Pressure first. Facts later. The teen froze. Not because he had something to hide, because a grown man with authority was suddenly talking to him like he'd already been caught. His brain did what a lot of people's brains do when power hits them out of nowhere. It stalled. He tried to explain he'd paid. He tried to point at the bag, the drink, the normal stuff. None of it mattered because the officer wasn't listening for truth. He was listening for a crack. Then came the consent trap. The officer pushed him to empty his pockets. He demanded the receipt. He leaned into that classic intimidation script where refusal gets framed as proof. He hinted at cuffs. He made the teen feel like the safest option was to just hand everything over and hope it ends. And the teen was alone in that exact spot. His dad had stepped away for a few minutes. Quick call, quick stop at a kiosk. He'd left his son near the storefront because it was a mall, not a dark alley. That's how normal this was supposed to be. Except it wasn't normal. Not anymore. People started noticing. A couple shoppers slowed down. One person stared a little too long. Someone else lifted a phone for a second, then lowered it like they weren't sure if this was their business. That hesitation matters. It's how bad stops survive in public spaces. The officer kept control by keeping the teen off balance. No request to the store. No contact with loss prevention. No quick confirmation that anything was missing. Just a tight circle of demands. Like the whole point was to make the teen mess up under stress. Then the dad came back into frame. He didn't run in yelling. He didn't swing his weight around. He didn't do that movie thing where somebody flashes a badge and everyone freezes. He read the scene like an investigator. He clocked the officer's stance, the kid's posture, the bag, the distance, the tone, the fact that this had already escalated way past a simple check. And he did one important thing right away. He didn't start with a speech. He started with questions. That's where the story turned. Not with anger, with structure. Because when you force a stop to explain itself out loud, a lot of confidence disappears. The dad stepped in close enough to be heard, not close enough to escalate. He didn't touch the officer, didn't grab his son, didn't try to big dog anyone. He just inserted himself into the space the officer was controlling. Then he did the one thing pressure tactics hate. He slowed it down. He asked what the stop was for. Simple, clean, no attitude. The officer didn't answer with specifics. He stayed on the accusation track. He kept directing the teen to comply. Bag, pockets, receipt. Now. That's when the dad started stacking questions like he was building a report in real time. He asked who reported the theft. The officer didn't give a name. He asked what store called it in. The officer gestured vaguely toward the storefront the kid had just exited, but he didn't say a manager's name, didn't say loss prevention, didn't say a call came through dispatch. Nothing you could pin down. He asked what item was stolen. The officer couldn't say. That's a problem because someone stole something isn't reasonable suspicion. It's a guess. And guesses don't justify detaining a kid and ordering him around like he's already guilty. The officer tried to pivot. He claimed the teen matched behavior he'd seen before. He referenced prior shoplifting incidents at the mall. He leaned on the vague stuff officers use when they don't have a real trigger. The dad didn't argue. He didn't debate. He just kept forcing the officer to name facts. He asked what the specific behavior was. The officer said things that sounded official but didn't mean anything. Looking around, walking fast, holding the bag a certain way. Normal mall behavior. Stuff half the shoppers do without thinking. Then the dad asked the question that boxed him in. He asked if there was an active theft report right now, yes or no. The officer avoided the yes or no. He kept returning to the demand for consent to search, because that was his real plan. Get the kid to comply, then write it up like the stop was productive. Even if nothing turned up, he could still frame the contact as justified. And the dad didn't let him. He asked if the teen was being detained or free to leave. That question changes everything. It forces the officer to choose. Detain without a basis or let go and lose control of the scene. The officer didn't want either option, so he tried the third one. Threats wrapped as choices. Comply and it's quick. Refuse and it gets serious. The teen looked like he was shrinking into himself. Not crying, not yelling. Just stuck in that awful spot where you're trying to be respectful while somebody treats you like a suspect in front of strangers. The dad stayed steady. He shifted his attention to his son for a second, checked if he was okay, then went right back to the officer. He asked whether the officer had spoken to the store's loss prevention. The officer hadn't. He asked whether anyone from the store had identified his son as a suspect. The officer couldn't say yes. Then the dad pointed out what the officer had done wrong without turning it into a speech. He'd approached with an accusation first, without confirming a theft report, and then tried to make compliance create justification after the fact. That's when the officer got defensive. He claimed he was doing his job. He claimed he was preventing theft. He claimed he didn't need a report to make contact. The dad didn't bite. He requested a supervisor, right there. No drama, just a direct request. He also requested mall security management. Same tone, same calm. Now the officer had a different problem. Because the moment supervisors show up, the first thing they ask is the same thing the dad asked. What's the basis? And that's when reality starts squeezing the story. Sergeant Patel arrived with the look of someone who'd handled 100 messy public stops and didn't want 101. She scanned the scene fast. The teen pinned near the storefront. The officer holding the space, the bag in the teen's hand, the small crowd building. She went straight to the point. She asked what the stop was based on. Officer Harlow tried to keep it vague. He framed it like prevention. He said he was being proactive because the mall had theft issues. He implied the kid's behavior triggered it. Patel didn't let him stay general. She asked who reported a theft. He didn't have a name. She asked which store requested him to stop that kid. He pointed toward the store entrance, but still didn't give a manager, a loss prevention contact, or a call time. He had no reference point that could be verified. Then she asked what item was stolen. He couldn't answer that either. That's when the stop stopped sounding like enforcement and started sounding like guessing. A real theft stop has an origin. Somebody saw something. Somebody called. Somebody requested a hold. There's a specific item, a description, a time, a direction of travel. None of that existed here. Mall security management got called in, and Ruben Vega showed up looking tight, like he already understood what no complainant means for liability. He asked the same questions, but in his own way. Was there an active theft report? Did loss prevention ask for assistance? Did any store confirm a missing item? No, no, no. Harlow tried to salvage it. He started talking about matching behavior and prior incidents. He suggested he'd seen kids steal in similar ways before. He kept pushing the idea that suspicion alone was enough. Patel cut through that. She asked whether the teen was being detained or free to go. Harlow hesitated because either answer created a problem. If the kid was detained, he needed an actual basis. If the kid was free to go, then all the pocket emptying and receipt demands were just intimidation dressed up as a voluntary interaction. Darius stayed calm and kept it factual. He told Patel the officer didn't open with a question. He opened with an accusation. He blocked the teen's path and demanded pockets and a receipt, then implied consequences if the teen didn't cooperate. Patel turned to Harlow and asked about his camera. That landed, because if Bodycam was required and it was on, it would capture exactly how the contact began. If it wasn't on, that created a different issue. Either way, the truth was about to get locked in. Vega added the mall angle. He looked up at the camera domes, then down the corridor. He didn't need to say much. Everyone there understood that hallway had coverage, and the footage would show whether Harlow had any confirmation before he treated the kid like a suspect. Patel pulled Harlow a few steps aside, low voice, direct posture. When they came back, she didn't debate the stop anymore. She ended it. She told Harlow to step back and let the teen go. Then she told Darius and his son they were free to leave, and asked if the teen needed medical attention or anything. Not because the teen looked injured, because she was documenting the fact that this stop had crossed into coercion, and she knew it. Darius didn't do the victory lap. He didn't announce his job. He didn't threaten consequences on the spot. He said one line controlled and clear, aimed at the point everyone was pretending not to see. The officer had accused first and searched for a reason after. And once that was said out loud, the whole scene changed. The crowd lost interest. The officer lost momentum. The teen got his space back. But Darius wasn't letting it end as a hallway misunderstanding. He already knew what happens when you let these stops fade out without paper and evidence. Darius didn't let the moment fade into everyone go about your day. He knew how that works. If you walk away without locking down facts, the report becomes the story. And the report usually protects the person with authority. He walked his son away from the crowd first, not far. Just enough to get breathing room and get the officer out of earshot. Then he did what most people don't think to do because they're still shaking. He documented. He checked the receipt, took a clear photo of it, and saved it with the time. He took quick photos of the hallway cameras above the storefront and the corridor because that mattered later when someone tried to claim the footage couldn't be found. He asked 2 witnesses for names and numbers. One agreed, one didn't. He didn't push, he moved on. He also took note of who was present on the authority side. Officer Harlow, Sergeant Patel, Mall Security Manager Vega, where they were standing, what time the supervisor arrived, what time the teen was released. Small details. That's what stops lies. Before leaving, Darius asked Patel for the incident documentation tied to the contact. If there wasn't an incident number, he wanted the supervisor to acknowledge that, too. He asked if the officer had Bodycam on and whether policy required it for public contacts. He didn't argue about policy in the hallway. He collected answers. Then he left the mall with his son. No celebration, no lecture, just a steady walkout. That night, Darius wrote the complaint the way he expected an investigator to write it if the roles were reversed. He didn't call the officer names. He didn't make it emotional. He listed actions in order. The officer blocked the teen's path. The officer opened with an accusation, not a question. The officer demanded pockets and receipt. The officer implied consequences for noncompliance. The officer had no theft report, no store request, no loss prevention contact. The stop only ended once a supervisor demanded a basis. He attached the receipt photo. He added witness contact info. He included the time window for surveillance. Then he sent preservation requests, mall camera angles, any body cam footage, any radio traffic, any logs showing whether a theft call ever happened. He included the exact corridor and storefront area so nobody could play dumb later. Internal Affairs opened it as a real inquiry, not a customer service issue. The first thing they pulled was video. That's where Officer Harlow's story started falling apart, because the footage showed sequence, and sequence is everything. It showed no one running from a store, no employee chasing, no loss prevention staff pointing anyone out. It showed the officer making the first move based on his own judgment, then trying to force the situation into a confession or consent outcome. The paperwork didn't match the behavior on screen. IA also did what IA does when a stop smells like a pattern. They audited him. They pulled recent contacts at the mall. They looked for the same structure: vague suspicion, immediate pressure for consent searches, heavy emphasis on compliance, thin documentation. They compared demographics. They compared how often he contacted teens of color versus others for the same behavior. It wasn't a one-off. They found repeated pretext stops. Stops framed as proactive safety but carried out like fishing. Get them nervous. Get them to consent. If you find anything, you win. If you find nothing, you still write it up like you were justified to check. Then came the lawsuit. The family's attorney focused on two things: unlawful detention and discriminatory enforcement. The legal hook was simple. You can't detain someone just because you feel like it. You need reasonable suspicion tied to specific facts. And you don't get to treat suspicion like guilt while you search for a reason after you've already cornered someone. Discovery did the real damage. The officer's report got compared to video. His wording got compared to body cam audio if it existed. His claim of matching behavior got tested against what actually happened. The lack of a theft report got confirmed through records. No call, no request, no complainant, no missing item report. That mismatch was the turning knife. Because it wasn't just a bad stop anymore. It was an officer willing to reshape reality on paper. The city had a choice: fight and risk trial with video and a pattern, or settle and control the fallout. They settled or lost. Either way, consequences landed. Policy changes followed because the department didn't want that case repeating. Mall contacts got tightened. Officers needed a documented complainant or documented facts tied to a suspected theft. Any search required clear justification, and consent couldn't be pressured the way Harlow pressured it. Supervisor involvement became mandatory for detentions in that mall setting. Body cam activation became non-negotiable for contacts like that. As for Officer Harlow, discipline escalated. Suspensions don't survive video plus pattern. His credibility didn't survive. And once credibility goes, policing work becomes a liability. Termination became the outcome because the department couldn't defend him in future cases without dragging this one back into the light. Jalen got something bigger than a momentary win. He got proof that he wasn't crazy for freezing. He wasn't weak for getting quiet. He was a teenager in a situation designed to make him fold. The only reason it didn't swallow him was because his dad came back, asked the right questions, and refused to let intimidation become a story. And Darius made sure that his son understood the truth without dressing it up. That accusation was never about a stolen item. If it was, there would have been a report, a description, a store request, a specific claim. What happened was an officer looked at a black teen with a bag and decided that was enough. So here's the question for you. if you were standing there watching, would you have pulled your phone out and kept it up? Would you have offered your name as a witness? Or would you have looked away and kept walking? Drop your thoughts in the comments and share this with someone who needs to hear how accountability actually happens in real life. And if you want more story times like this, realistic, modern, and built around facts, make sure you subscribe.
Sir, stop right there. We need to check you.
What's the reason for the stop?
There's a suspicious activity report. You match the description. Move over here.
What suspected crime?
Man, just comply. You don't have to ask about everything.
I'm willing to identify myself through courthouse security. Verify me at that desk.
Not at the door. Over here.
What happened when a black federal judge walked into his own courthouse on a quiet Thursday morning and a uniformed officer decided he looked like a problem? The answer got ugly fast because the officer didn't just try to check him out. He tried to control him in public with no clear reason. And the cameras didn't just catch an embarrassing moment. They caught a breakdown of legal standards in real time. Before we get into it, tell me where you're watching from. Country, state, city, whatever. And if you watch these stories because you're tired of power getting abused with zero consequences, hit like and subscribe. It tells the algorithm you want accountability content, not excuses. Now rewind a few minutes because this didn't start as some loud scene. It started like any other workday. Judge Malcolm Reed arrived early like he usually did. Same routine, same calm pace. He wasn't rushing. No entourage. Just a leather briefcase, a travel mug, and that quiet, locked-in focus people get when they've got a full docket and no time for nonsense. He crossed the plaza towards the employee entrance. Federal buildings had their own rhythm in the morning. A few staffers drifting in. Security stationed at the doors. A couple people checking phones while walking. Normal. Then Officer Daniel Hargrove stepped into his path. Not a greeting, not a quick question. A hard stop. The kind that wasn't about safety, it was about dominance. Hargrove told him to move to the side. Told him to keep his hands visible. Told him to stop right there. Judge Reed didn't argue, and he did the exact thing people always claim they want. He stayed still, hands open, no sudden movement, calm face, calm voice. He asked one question first, the one that matters every time. He asked if he was being detained. Hargrove didn't answer cleanly. He said there was a suspicious activity report. He said the judge fit the description. That was it. No crime name, no behavior described, no actual detail. Just that phrase people use when they want to act first and justify later. Judge Reed asked what the suspected crime was. Hargrove didn't give one. He repeated the suspicious activity line and pushed another command, something like stepping back and staying put, while he figured it out. Here's where most people mess up. They try to talk their way out emotionally. They get loud, they get defensive, or they panic and start digging for ID too fast, and the officer treats that like a threat. Judge Reed didn't do any of that. He kept his hands visible and told the officer he was willing to identify himself, but the officer needed to state the legal basis for ordering him around. He needed articulable facts. He needed something more than a vague description. Hargrove didn't like hearing that. You could tell by how his posture changed. He leaned into the authority voice, the I said move energy. Judge Reed didn't match his volume. He didn't match his ego. He stayed professional, almost boring about it. That was the point. He told the officer he was a federal judge assigned to the building. He told him he had credentials. He told him he'd present them safely. And he told him to verify through proper channels, courthouse security, internal directory, whatever the procedure was. That's when Hargrove tried to tighten the circle. He edged closer. He told the judge to stop talking. He tried to reposition him away from the door, away from the entrance cameras, away from the security desk behind the glass. And the judge didn't go. Not because he was being stubborn, because he understood what that movement meant. Once you let someone relocate you with no basis, the story becomes theirs. The record gets murky. The power shifts. Judge Reed held his position and repeated the process. Verify credentials, state the grounds, call security, document it. By now, staffers were noticing. At first, people did that thing where they pretend not to look. They slow down, they glance. They keep walking, but their eyes keep coming back. Then someone stopped completely. It was Elena Vargas, a young clerk coming in with a tote bag and a badge on a lanyard. She saw the judge's hands open, saw the officer crowding him, and saw the mismatch right away. She didn't jump into the middle. She did what people do now. She pulled out her phone and started recording. Another staffer followed her lead, then another, quietly. No shouting, just phones coming up. That changed the whole temperature. Hargrove noticed. You could almost feel his confidence bump for half a second, because some officers think cameras protect them. Then the second bump came, the one that hits when they realize the footage might not back their story. He tried to get control back with bigger commands. He told the judge to comply. He implied the judge was resisting. He tried to frame the calm refusal to move as a problem. Judge Reed didn't take the bait. He asked again if he was being detained or free to enter the building. Hargrove still wouldn't answer directly. So the judge did the next step. He told Hargrove to call courthouse security immediately and verify his identity. He offered the credential information in a controlled way. No fast reaching, no rummaging. He described where the badge was and asked the officer if he wanted it displayed or if he preferred security confirm it first. That's the part people don't understand. The judge wasn't pulling rank. He was forcing procedure into a situation that was sliding into improvisation. And improvisation is where bias hides. The building's glass doors were right there. The security desk inside had a clean view. Hargrove could have walked 10 feet, asked for verification, and ended it. But he didn't want to do that yet. He wanted compliance first. So he stalled. He repeated that line again. Fit the description. Judge Reed pressed for details. What description? Who reported it? What behavior? What time? What exactly did the caller say the person did? Hargrove didn't have answers. He had posture. And with every second that passed, more phones came up. More witnesses locked in. More staff realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an officer trying to control a black man at a federal courthouse without being able to explain why. Right then, Hargrove made the move that turned the whole thing from uncomfortable to serious. He reached toward his radio like he was about to call it in, but he didn't call courthouse security. He called it out like it was a street stop, and you could see Judge Reed clock it immediately. He didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He just tightened his language and demanded the proper channel again. Because once the wrong channel gets involved, it snowballs. And this time, it was snowy conditions already. Hargrove's radio call brought the wrong kind of attention. Not courthouse verification, not, "Can you confirm this employee?" He treated it like a suspect stop. Judge Reed didn't panic. He didn't start talking faster. He narrowed the issue. He told Hargrove to state clearly whether Reed was being detained. He told him to state the suspected offense. He told him to stop giving movement orders without legal grounds. Hargrove tried a different tactic. He shifted from commands to insinuations. He kept repeating that someone reported suspicious activity, like repeating it made it real. He also tried to pressure Reed into producing ID on the officer's timeline in the officer's way. Reed didn't refuse to identify. He refused to play a sloppy game. He told Hargrove he would present credentials safely, but only after Hargrove stopped escalating and contacted courthouse security. Reed didn't want a look at this quickly moment. He wanted a logged verification through the people who actually controlled access to that building. More staff gathered near the entrance. Not a crowd, but enough. People stood still. Phones stayed up. Some filmed from a distance. One person clearly aimed at the officer's nameplate. Hargrove noticed the nameplate angle and adjusted his stance like he wanted to block it. That alone told everyone what kind of stop this was turning into. Reed kept his hands visible the entire time. He also kept his voice even. That's what made the officer's behavior look worse with every second. No one watching could pretend this was about safety. Reed wasn't acting unsafe. Reed was acting like a trained professional. Hargrove tried to reclaim the scene by creating urgency. He implied Reed was delaying an investigation. He hinted that people who cooperate have nothing to worry about. Reed cut through that with one point. Cooperation doesn't replace legal standards. He asked again for the articulable facts behind the stop. Not vibes, not a vague description. What did the caller actually see, and what did Reed actually do? Hargrove still couldn't answer. Then he tried to reposition Reed again, pushing him toward an area away from the doors and away from the glass where security could see. It wasn't subtle. That's when a staffer behind the doors tapped the glass, getting security's attention. Now the building's security desk was watching directly. Reed took that opening. He told Hargrove to contact that desk and confirm. He told him the badge number was available if needed. He told him he wasn't moving until verification happened. Hargrove hesitated. That hesitation mattered because it exposed the truth. Verification would end the stop, and he didn't want it ended yet. He wanted compliance first, then maybe verification after. And that's when the mask started slipping. Hargrove said the quiet part in a cleaner uniform tone. He suggested Reed didn't look like who he claimed to be. He treated Reed's credentials as suspect before even seeing them. Like the claim itself was the problem. People recording caught that shift immediately. You could feel it. A couple staffers stopped pretending they were just passing through. They stayed planted. Reed didn't react emotionally. He didn't get into identity arguments. He treated it like a policy failure. He told Hargrove that this was a federal facility with established verification protocols, and Hargrove was refusing to use them. Reed told him that if he continued ordering movement without a stated offense and without reasonable suspicion, it would be documented as an unlawful detention attempt. That word, documented, changed Hargrove's face. He realized Reed wasn't trying to win a moment. Reed was building a record. Hargrove tried to interrupt. Reed kept it measured and short. He told him to call his supervisor. He told him to call courthouse security. He told him to stop escalating. Inside the glass, security began moving. A supervisor stepped away from the desk with purpose. You could see it in the way she walked. Straight line, no hesitation. Hargrove looked toward the doors and tried to talk over it, like he could still steer the narrative before help arrived. Too late. Because now it wasn't just Reed versus Hargrove. It was Reed, witnesses, multiple camera angles, and a supervisor coming out to verify in front of everyone. And once verification happened, there would be only one question left. Why did Hargrove need this stop to happen in the first place? Security supervisor Asha Nguyen came out fast. No hesitation. She took one look at the scene and did the first thing Hargrove should have done from the start. She asked for verification points. Judge Reed gave them. Controlled. Minimal movement. Credentials ready, but not flashed like a stunt. He kept his hands visible and let Asha run the process. Asha didn't treat it like a debate. She treated it like a checklist. Badge, name, internal confirmation. Hargrove tried to speak over it. He tried to keep the stop alive by repeating the same excuse. Suspicious activity. Fits the description. Public safety. Asha didn't bite. She asked him what the specific description was and what specific conduct was reported. Hargrove couldn't provide it. Not cleanly, not concretely. He didn't have a reported crime. He didn't have articulable facts. He had a vague call and a guess. That was the moment the tone flipped, because Asha's verification came back fast. Judge Malcolm Reed was exactly who he said he was, assigned to that building, expected, cleared. Hargrove's face changed. Not embarrassment first, irritation, like the truth was inconvenient. He tried to downgrade the whole thing into a quick check. He acted like he'd been doing routine diligence. But the phones were still up. Witnesses heard every command. They saw the attempts to move Reed away from the doors. They heard the refusal to state a suspected offense. They watched Hargrove call it in like a street stop instead of a courthouse verification. Asha told Hargrove, in plain terms, that verification was complete and the interaction was over. She also told him to provide his supervisor contact immediately. That's when Hargrove tried to retreat without accountability. He pivoted like he wanted to walk away and let it disappear. Judge Reed stopped that part. He didn't chase him. He didn't threaten him. He made it procedural. He told Asha he wanted every relevant record preserved: bodycam, radio traffic, dispatch logs, courthouse camera angles, entry logs. He also requested the names and contact info for the staff who witnessed it and the security team who responded. He said it calmly, like he'd done it before, like he was already writing the outline of the complaint in his head. Hargrove tried one last push. He implied Reed was overreacting. He suggested it was not that serious. Reed didn't accept that framing. He pointed out the core issue. Hargrove issued orders without a stated legal basis and used a vague description as cover. He made the officer choose between two options on record. Either there was reasonable suspicion supported by facts, or there wasn't. Hargrove couldn't pick one without incriminating himself. Chief Deputy Marshal Terrence Blake arrived right after that. The difference was immediate. Blake didn't posture. He asked direct questions, the ones that turn a messy scene into an accountable report. He asked Hargrove what the suspected crime was. He asked what facts supported the stop. He asked why courthouse security wasn't contacted first. Hargrove tried to answer in generalities. Blake didn't accept generalities. Blake told him to give specifics or stop talking, and he reminded him that the stop had witnesses and video from multiple angles. That's when Hargrove's confidence finally collapsed. He shifted to misunderstanding. He tried to blame the call. He tried to blame vague information. He tried to paint it as caution. Blake didn't let him hide behind that. If you're going to stop someone at a federal courthouse, you need facts, you need channels, you need documentation that holds up. Judge Reed didn't celebrate, he didn't lecture, he kept it clean. He told Asha and Blake that he wanted an incident report generated immediately with a preservation order for all video and audio. He also asked that Hargrove's assignment history at that location be reviewed for similar stops. That last part landed, because everyone there understood what it meant. This wasn't about one bad morning, this was about pattern. Hargrove stood there, boxed in by process. Witnesses, cameras, oversight. No wiggle room left. Judge Reed ended the public part with one line, steady and clear. Next time, verify first, facts before force. And then he did the most cutting thing of all. He walked into the building like he belonged there, because he did. Judge Reed didn't turn it into a debate. He turned it into a record. Same day, he requested preservation of everything tied to the stop: bodycam, radio traffic, dispatch notes, courthouse exterior video, lobby video, and entry logs. No gaps, no lost footage later. Asha and Nguyen gathered witness names and timestamps, not opinions, what they saw, what they heard, what orders were given, where Reed stood, where Hargrove tried to move him. By end of day, Reed filed a formal complaint through the correct channels. Clean and direct, time and location officer identity, reason given, suspicious activity, fits the description. Refusal to name a suspected crime, movement orders without legal basis. Verification result, request for review and corrective action. He demanded a case number and written confirmation of receipt. The video spread anyway, first through staff, then outside the building. Once it started circulating, the handle it quietly option died. Oversight pulled Hargrove's history around the courthouse. Prior stops, prior complaints, prior suspicious person contacts. Same pattern showed up. Vague justification, heavy commands early, then retreat when challenged. Hargrove lost his courthouse detail assignment and went under formal review. Training and discipline followed. Supervisors got questioned too. The courthouse updated procedure after that. Verification became mandatory before escalation at that entrance. If someone claimed affiliation and could be confirmed, officers had to confirm first instead of trying to control first. And the culture shifted. Staff recorded faster. People asked clearer questions out loud, not to cause scenes, to stop bad stops from becoming routine. That's the lesson. Vague suspicion isn't a legal standard. Process is. If you were in Reed's position, would you stay calm and force verification, or would you just comply to get it over with? Comment what you do. Share this with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more stories like this.